The winter wind howled across Blackfoot Ridge as three riders crossed Emma Thornwood's fence line. By morning, only one would escape alive, and he would never speak of what he had seen. The 26-year-old widow tending her sheep looked harmless enough. Auburn hair pinned up beneath a simple bonnet, flour dusting her apron. A wedding ring still worn on her left hand catching the pale November sunlight. They could not have known she was the Phantom. 12 confirmed kills across 4 territories. Never seen, never caught. A ghost that bled men dry and vanished into legend. The Garrett Gang had burned 9 homesteads that autumn of 1879, left 17 souls dead in their wake. Women, children, old men who begged for mercy and received none. Their fatal mistake was assuming a young woman alone on a mountain meant easy prey. Montana Territory, November 1879. 5 years before statehood would bring the veneer of civilization to these wild lands, where law was a week's hard ride away through mountain passes that could kill a man as dead as any bullet, where legends were born in gunsmoke and buried in unmarked graves that the prairie wind would erase before spring. If you are watching from somewhere with bitter winters, drop your location in the comments below. You will understand why this mountain became her fortress. Why every rock and tree was an ally she had known since childhood. Hit that subscribe button. Tomorrow we reveal the outlaw preacher who brought justice to a lawless town without firing a single shot. A story that will leave you speechless. Now let us begin. Emma Morrison. Thornwood stood at the fence line of her property counting sheep. 203, all accounted for. Her hands moved with military precision as she tallied them, a habit born from years of training most women her age had never received. The morning air bit cold against her cheeks, carrying the scent of pine and coming snow. November in the Montana high country was unforgiving, beautiful and deadly in equal measure. She had bought this land 8 months ago with every dollar she had saved, $150 for 800 acres of mountainside that most men considered worthless. Too steep for cattle, too remote for farming, too wild for civilized folk. But Emma knew better. This mountain was not just land, it was home. It was memory. It was the place where Jeremiah Blackwood had raised her from a terrified 6-year-old orphan into something far more dangerous than any man who might threaten her. The mountain remembers, Jeremiah used to say. His voice still echoed in her mind 15 years after his death. Every stone, every tree, every shadow. Learn it, love it. And when trouble comes, and trouble always comes, you will have an army they cannot see. Emma adjusted the worn Winchester 1873 rifle leaning against the fence post. Her fingers brushed its stock with the familiarity of a longtime companion. Nearby, her wedding ring caught the light again. She touched it briefly. James Thornwood had been a good man, a cavalry officer with an honest heart who had known about her past and loved her anyway. 8 months since the riding accident that broke his neck and left her a widow at 26. 8 months of peace on this mountain, tending sheep and trying to forget the feel of a trigger beneath her finger. A coyote moved along the ridge 300 yards distant. Emma watched it through narrowed eyes. Too bold, too close to the flock. Without seeming to hurry, she picked up a stone the size of a hen's egg. Her arm moved in a smooth arc born of countless repetitions. The stone flew true across the impossible distance. The coyote yelped once and vanished into the brush, limping. Emma allowed herself the ghost of a smile. Still had it. Jeremiah would have been proud. But the smile faded as her gaze shifted to the southern horizon. There, 3 miles out, maybe less. A dust cloud rising against the pale sky. 3 riders. She could tell by the spacing of the dust, the rhythm of it. Heavy men on tired horses, moving with purpose toward her land. Her pulse did not quicken. Her breathing remained steady. These were luxuries weakness could not afford. Instead, Emma calculated. 3 riders, 2 hours until they arrived given the terrain. Time enough to prepare. Time enough to decide. She gathered her sheep with practiced efficiency, driving them toward the barn where they would be safe from stray bullets. Then she walked to the cabin, each step deliberate, and began loading weapons. The Winchester held 15 rounds. Her Shepington 1858 revolver 6. The knife in her boot, one chance if everything else failed. She checked each weapon with the care of a craftsman inspecting tools. Clean, oiled, ready. As her hands worked, her mind drifted to 2 days earlier. To Pine Valley and the warnings that had come too late to change anything. The town of Pine Valley clung to existence in a narrow valley 20 miles south of Emma's mountain. 240 souls, give or take, depending on how the silver mines were producing. Main Street consisted of essentials. Rutherford's general store, where Thaddeus Rutherford held court over the town's gossip. the Silver Bell Saloon where miners drank away their wages and their futures. Sheriff Daltrey's office, a joke of law enforcement that everyone understood but no one spoke about openly. Doc Silas Pritchard's clinic smelling of carbolic and whiskey. And the church standing white and proud, as if faith alone could redeem a town built on greed and violence. Emma had ridden into Pine Valley on November 16th, 2 days before the riders would cross her fence. She needed ammunition, coffee, salt, the mundane supplies of a life she was trying to build from the ashes of her past. Thaddeus Rutherford stood behind the counter of his general store, a man of 55 with the bearing of the Union quartermaster he had once been. His eyes sharp despite his years tracked Emma as she selected her goods. When she placed 4 boxes of 45-70 ammunition on the counter, his eyebrows rose. A lot of ammunition for sheep, Miss Thornwood. Emma met his gaze without flinching. Wolves have been troublesome this year. Rutherford's expression suggested he knew exactly what kind of wolves she meant. The 2-legged variety that had been terrorizing homesteads throughout the territory. He wrapped her purchases in brown paper, with practiced efficiency, his silence speaking volumes. As Emma counted out coins, the door opened with a blast of cold air. Deputy Nathaniel Holloway stepped inside, bringing with him the earnest intensity of a young man who still believed justice could be found in badges and courtrooms. At 24, he was too educated for frontier law enforcement. Boston born and bred with the accent to prove it. But something had driven him west, and whatever that something was, it had landed him in Pine Valley with ideals that would get him killed if he was not careful. Miss Thornwood, may I have a word? Emma nodded. Outside, if you please, Deputy. Mr. Rutherford has other customers to attend. They stepped into the November chill. Main Street was quiet, the miners still underground, the respectable folk hiding from the cold. Nate shifted his weight, uncomfortable with what he had to say. I wanted to warn you. The Garrett Gang has been moving north. 9 homesteads burned in the past 3 months. 17 people dead. They have a pattern. They target isolated properties, especially those owned by women living alone. Emma's expression did not change. I appreciate your concern, Deputy. Nate pressed on desperation creeping into his voice. Miss Thornwood, Sheriff Daltrey will not act. The Garretts pay him to look the other way. I cannot stop them alone. You should leave. Go to Helena. Stay with family until this passes. And if it does not pass, Emma asked quietly, if men like the Garretts keep coming, do I run forever better than dying alone on that mountain? Emma pulled on her riding gloves, each finger settling into place with deliberate care. Deputy Holloway, some fights are not yours to pick, and some mountains are worth dying on. Good day. She mounted her horse, a sturdy roan mare named Copper, and turned toward home. But before she could leave, another voice called out, Miss Emma! Doc Silas Pritchard stood in the doorway of his clinic, his weathered face unreadable. He was 58 with the kind of scars that came from serving as a field surgeon in the Mexican War 30 years prior. He had seen Emma's knife wound 3 months back when she had been careless while butchering a sheep. Or so she had claimed. The wound had been too clean, too precise. The kind of cut that came from another knife in a fight, not from an accident. Their eyes met. He gave the slightest nod. She returned it. A silent understanding passed between them. Doc Pritchard knew. He had always known. And he had kept her secret because men like Jeremiah Blackwood had saved his daughter from typhoid 15 years ago, and debts like that were not measured in currency. Emma rode home as the sun began its descent toward the western peaks. The temperature dropped with each passing mile, her breath forming clouds in the air. She thought about Nate's warning, about the Garrett Gang and their pattern of violence, about the fact that she fit their target profile perfectly. A young widow, isolated property, no close neighbors, no family to avenge her. Easy prey. They had no idea what they were riding toward. Back in her cabin with the weapons loaded and the sun sinking low, Emma allowed herself to remember. The memories came whether she wanted them or not, triggered by the simple act of checking her rifle. She was 13 years old again, standing on this very mountain with Jeremiah Blackwood, the man who had found her wandering the prairie at age 6, the sole survivor of a Cheyenne raid that had killed her parents and brother. The man who could have left her to die or delivered her to an orphanage. Instead, he had raised her as his own. Jeremiah stood behind her, his weathered hands steadying her grip on the rifle. What is the first rule when trouble comes, Emma girl? Terrain is your ally, numbers are theirs. And what do? Make them come to me, because I know this land, they do not. Good. Now breathe. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. The rifle barked. The target, a pine cone at 100 yards, exploded. Jeremiah's hand squeezed her shoulder with pride. Now again, until you can do it without thinking. Until the rifle is part of you. They had trained for years, shooting, tracking, reading signs in bent grass and disturbed earth, setting snares and deadfalls, understanding how weather moved, how animals behaved, how men thought when they were hunting. Violence is a tool, Emma Jeremiah had told her one night by the campfire, his face grave in the flickering light. Use it right, put it away clean, but never, never lose yourself to it. Promise me. She had promised. A promise she had kept until Jeremiah's death forced her to break it. 12 men she had hunted across 4 territories over 3 years. 12 hired guns who had ambushed and murdered the greatest scout the frontier had ever known. 12 clean kills. 12 ghosts that still visited her dreams. Then James Thornwood had found her. Jeremiah's nephew, a man who knew what she had done and loved her not despite it, but because of the loyalty that had driven her to avenge his uncle. He had made her promise to stop, to put away the rifle and the rage, and build a life worth living. She had kept that promise for 6 years, until the riding accident took James, until she found herself alone again on the mountain where it had all begun. Emma shook off the memories and returned to the present. The sun touched the western peaks, painting the snow orange and gold. Beautiful, deceptive. In an hour it would be dark, and darkness was when men with ill intentions preferred to make their moves. But the Garrett Gang did not wait for darkness. They arrived with the sunset, 3 riders silhouetted against the dying light. Emma watched from her cabin porch, the Winchester held casual, but ready across her lap. She had changed into practical clothes, boots that could run, trousers beneath her skirts, a shawl that concealed the Remington holstered at her hip. The riders stopped at her fence line 100 yards distant. The protocol of the frontier demanded they wait there until invited closer. Emma did not invite them. The center rider dismounted. Even at this distance, she could see the flash of gold when he smiled. Clayton Garrett, 38 years old, wanted for murder in 3 territories, though the warrants were conveniently lost whenever sheriffs received their monthly payments. He wore matched Colt Navy revolvers and fancy tooled holsters, the kind of guns men carried when they cared more about appearance than function. To his left, Virgil Pike, called Scarface for the jagged mark that ran from his temple to his jaw, a souvenir from a knife fight in Abilene. A brutal man who enjoyed his work too much. To his right, Johnny Wade, 22 and eager to prove himself, fast with a gun and faster with his mouth. The kind of young fool who would get himself killed trying to build a reputation. Emma remained still as stone as Clayton approached the fence. His smile widened, revealing that gold tooth in full glory. "Evening, ma'am. Fine piece of land you have got here." Emma's voice came level and cold. "It is, and it is mine. I have got the deed to prove it." Clayton laughed, the sound carrying false warmth. "Deeds are just paper, sweetheart. Paper burns real easy. So do men who cross fences without invitation." Virgil leaned forward in his saddle, his scarred face twisting into a sneer. That a threat, little girl? Emma's eyes shifted to him, and something in her gaze made him straighten despite himself. "No, sir. A courtesy. One chance to turn those horses around." Clayton moved closer to the fence, his hand resting on his gun belt in a casual threat. "See, here is what is going to happen. You are going to sell me this land. $50. That is generous considering. Not for sale, not for 50, not for 5,000. The false smile slipped from Clayton's face like a mask removed. "You misunderstand. This was not a negotiation. You have got 2 choices. Sell and ride away peaceful, or we take it and you will not need to worry about it anymore." Emma stood slowly, the Winchester coming up with her in a movement so smooth it seemed choreographed. Her voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried across the distance. "Third choice. You leave. Right now. While you still can." Clayton laughed again, but there was an edge to it now. "Or what? You going to shoot me, pretty thing, like you probably never even held a gun before, let alone fired one at a man." The Winchester spoke for her. The bullet kicked up dirt precisely between Clayton's boots, close enough that he felt the spray of frozen earth against his legs. The sound echoed off the mountains, then died into ringing silence. Clayton stumbled backward, his hand flying to his gun, but stopping short of drawing. Behind him, the horses spooked and danced. Johnny's hand was on his revolver, but Virgil grabbed his wrist, holding him back. Emma had not moved. The rifle was already reloaded, the barrel steady on Clayton's chest. "Next one is 2 inches higher," she said, her voice empty of emotion. "Then 4, then 6. You counting or you leaving?" Clayton's face flushed red, anger and humiliation warring with something that might have been fear. He took another step back, forcing his hands to unclench. "Spirited. I do like spirit in a woman." His voice shook slightly, despite his attempt at bravado. "But spirit breaks, sweetheart. We will be back, and we will not knock polite next time." Johnny started to speak, but Clayton cut him off with a sharp gesture. Not yet. Let her sweat a couple days. They mounted and rode away, but slowly trying to salvage some dignity from the retreat. Emma watched until they disappeared into the gathering dusk, the dust of their passage hanging in the cold air, like a promise of violence deferred but not abandoned. Only when they were truly gone did Emma allow herself to breathe. Her hands, which had held the rifle rocks steady throughout the confrontation, began to tremble. Not from fear, from the effort of restraint. From the knowledge of how close she had come to ending it right there. 3 shots, 3 bodies, 3 more ghosts to keep the 12 company in her dreams. Papa Jeremiah, she whispered to the empty air. They are coming, just like you said someone always would. She went inside and barred the door, but she did not sleep. Instead, she sat by the window, with the rifle across her knees, watching the darkness and remembering the lessons that had been burned into her soul. The next morning brought news that changed everything. Emma was mending fence when she heard hoofbeats approaching from the east. A single rider moving fast. She recognized the horse before she saw the man. It belonged to Caleb Whitmore, her nearest neighbor, though nearest was a relative term in country where homesteads were measured in miles apart rather than yards. But it was not Caleb riding. It was his 12-year-old son, Timothy, hatless and wild-eyed, his horse lathered with sweat despite the cold. Miss Emma missing? Emma dropped her tools and ran to meet him. The boy nearly fell from his saddle. She caught him, steadying him. What is it, Timothy? What happened? It is the widow Fairchild and little Benji. They are gone. Pa found their cabin door busted in. Signs of a struggle. And this, he thrust a crumpled piece of paper into her hands. Emma smoothed it out, her jaw tightening as she read the crude letters. Widow Thornwood, trade your deed for the woman and brat. Miller's barn, sunset today. Come alone or they burn. See. Emma looked up at the angle of the sun. Past noon, maybe 6 hours until sunset. Miller's barn was 2 miles from here, but isolated. Perfect for an ambush. Tell your father I am going to get them, Emma said quietly. Timothy's eyes went wide. Miss Emma Pa says there is 15 of them. The whole Garrett Gang. You cannot go alone. Go home, Timothy. Tell your father what I said. And stay there. Keep your mother and sisters inside until this is done. The boy wanted to argue, but something in Emma's face stopped him. He had seen that look on men's faces before. The look of someone who had already decided to walk into fire and would not be turned aside by reason or fear. Emma watched him ride away, then turned back to her cabin. She moved with purpose, now no wasted motion. This was what Jeremiah had trained her for. Not the killing itself, but the preparation. The cold calculation that turned chaos into choreography. She selected her weapons with care. The Winchester, of course, 15 rounds. The Remington revolver, 6 shots. Her boot knife honed to a razor edge. And something else. Something she had not touched in 8 months. A second revolver hidden beneath a floorboard in the cabin. A matching Remington to the one she carried, but this one bore a small silver phoenix engraved on the grip. Jeremiah's gun. The weapon that had killed 7 men in his last fight before they finally brought him down. Emma held it for a long moment, feeling the weight of memory and obligation. Then she loaded it and slipped it into a second holster concealed beneath her shawl. She was saddling Copper when another rider arrived. Deputy Nathaniel Holloway, his young face set with determination. Miss Thornwood, I heard what happened. I am going with you. Emma did not look up from tightening the cinch. No, you are not. Yes, I am. Abigail Fairchild and her son are innocent people. If Sheriff Daltrey will not act, then by God, I will. This time Emma did look at him, and Nate took an involuntary step back from what he saw in her eyes. You ride to Helena, deputy. Get the federal marshal. Bring him back with a warrant and enough men to do this legal. That is 4 days there and back. Abigail has 8 hours. Then she has 8 hours for me to get her back. But you have got a future in the law, Nathaniel Holloway. Do not throw it away on a fight that is not yours. Nate's jaw set, stubborn. Someone has to stand up to men like the Garretts. If not me, then who? Emma swung into the saddle with fluid grace. Me. Because I have already lost everything I could lose. You have not. Not yet. But Nate was already mounting his own horse. I am going. You can try to stop me, but by the time we finish arguing, the sun will be setting and we will both be too late. Emma stared at him for a long moment. Then she saw it. The same stubborn idealism that had gotten Jeremiah killed. The same refusal to let evil pass unchallenged, even when wisdom suggested retreat. And she knew with sudden clarity that Nate would ride to Miller's barn whether she allowed it or not. Better to have him where she could see him than charging in blind. Fine, she said. But you do exactly what I tell you when I tell you without question. Understood. Understood. They rode south together as the sun began its descent. Along the way, Emma explained her plan. It was simple, which was good. Complex plans fell apart the moment the first shot was fired. Nate would position himself on the ridge, overlooking Miller's barn, 300 yards out. He had a Springfield rifle accurate at that range. His job was not to kill anyone, it was to create chaos, to make the Garretts think they were facing more than just one woman. "And what will you be doing?" Nate asked. "Getting Abigail and Benji out. Nothing else matters. What about the Garretts? What about them? You are just going to let them go." Emma's smile held no warmth. "Deputy, if they are smart, they will let me go. If they are not smart, well, that is their choice to make." As they approached Miller's barn, Emma's mind shifted into the cold clarity that Jeremiah had trained into her. Every detail became sharp. The angle of the late afternoon sun, the direction of the wind, the placement of rocks and trees that could serve as cover, the approaches and exits, the kill zones and the safe paths. Miller's barn had been abandoned for 3 years, ever since old Thomas Miller died without heirs. The structure sagged, but still stood gray wood weathered to silver, perfect for an ambush. The Garretts would have men in the loft, behind the wagon, in the trees to either side. They would let Emma ride in, then close the trap. She left Nate at the ridge with whispered instructions. "Wait for my signal. When you hear the first shot start firing, aim high, make noise, then get to your horse and ride like hell for Pine Valley. And if you need help, then I am already dead, and you staying will just give them 2 bodies instead of 1. Before Nate could protest, Emma was gone, moving toward the barn on foot, with her horse trailing behind on a long lead. She had removed her riding skirt, revealing the men's trousers beneath. Easier to move, easier to fight. The shawl stayed concealing the arsenal beneath. The sun touched the western peaks as Emma approached Miller's barn. Right on time, she could see Abigail and 7-year-old Benji through the open barn door tied to posts. Alive, frightened, but alive. That was something. Clayton Garrett stepped out from behind the barn, his gold tooth catching the dying light. He was alone, which meant the others were exactly where Emma expected them to be. Hidden, waiting. "Smart widow," Clayton called. Right on time. Emma stopped 20 yards away, her hands visible but near her weapons. "Where are they?" "Who your men?" "The ones in the loft, behind the wagon." "In the trees." "You did not think I would believe you came alone?" Clayton's smile faltered, then returned wider. "You are smarter than you look, sweetheart. All right, here is how this works. You hand over that deed, we let them go. Everyone walks away, let them go first, then we talk about the deed. Do not think you are in a position to negotiate. I think I am in exactly that position. Because you need me to sign that deed or it is worthless. Dead women do not sign papers." A voice from the shadows. Virgil Pike, his scarred face appearing at the barn entrance. "Maybe we do not need your signature, widow. Maybe we just need you gone. Then you have got no reason to keep Abigail and Benji alive. Let them go, or I burn the deed right here, right now, and you get nothing." Clayton's hand moved toward his gun. Emma's hand moved faster, but she did not draw. Just rested it on the Remington beneath her shawl. "That would be a mistake, Mr. Garrett. Think you are fast enough? I know I am. Question is, are you willing to find out?" The standoff held for 3 heartbeats. Then Benji's young voice broke the tension. "Miss Emma, do not. It is a trap. There are more of them. They are going to kill you anyway." The sound of a hand striking flesh. Abigail's cry of pain as Virgil backhanded her for the boy's warning. And something in Emma Thornwood died in that moment. The part that still believed in mercy. The part that James had nurtured. The part that thought she could live without becoming what Jeremiah had trained her to be. Her voice when she spoke carried a different quality. Harder, colder. The voice of the phantom. "You just made a fatal mistake." Clayton laughed. "What are you going to do?" "You are surrounded, 15 guns on you." Emma's smile was terrible to see. "No, Mr. Garrett. You are surrounded. You just do not know it yet." The confusion on Clayton's face lasted exactly 1 second. Then the ridge erupted in gunfire. Nate Springfield barked once, twice, 3 times. A man screamed in the barn loft and fell crashing through rotted boards to the ground below. The horses, tied behind the barn, spooked and bolted, taking 2 more Garrett men with them in a tangle of reins and cursing. Emma moved. Her shawl fell away as both Remingtons cleared leather in a fluid draw that would have made Jeremiah weep with pride. The right-hand gun spoke first, dropping one of the men emerging from the trees. The left-hand gun answered, taking down the guard near Abigail before he could draw his weapon. She was moving the entire time, a dancer in a ballet of violence. Never still, never where they expected her to be. rolling behind the water trough as bullets chewed the dirt where she had stood. Coming up, shooting each round placed with precision, born of 10,000 hours of practice. The Garrett Gang had numbers. Emma had preparation and skill, and a mountain's worth of rage that had been bottled for 8 months. Virgil Pike came at her with a knife thinking he could take her in close quarters. He was bigger, stronger, heavier. It should have been his advantage. Emma sidestepped his rush, used his momentum against him, and buried her boot knife in his kidney as he passed. He went down hard, screaming. She took his Bowie knife as he fell, leaving her boot knife buried in his flesh. Around her, chaos reigned. Men shouted contradictory orders. Shots rang out from multiple directions as the Garretts fired at shadows in each other in their confusion. Nate continued his methodical firing from the ridge, each shot adding to the chaos even when it hit nothing but wood and earth. Emma fought toward Abigail and Benji. A man stepped into her path, gun raised. She threw the Bowie knife underhand. It took him in the throat. He dropped gurgling. She reached the post where they were tied. Abigail's face was bloody from Virgil's strike, but her eyes were fierce. "Can you ride?" Emma asked as she cut their bonds. "Yes. Take Benji, east door. 3 seconds. Go." Abigail did not question, did not hesitate. She grabbed her son and ran for the eastern exit of the barn, the one Emma had scouted and knew would give them the clearest path to the horses Emma had pre-positioned in the trees that afternoon before the Garretts had even arrived. Emma provided covering fire, both Remingtons speaking in alternating rhythm. The Garretts caught between the unexpected resistance, and their crumbling organization began to break. Johnny Wade, the young hothead, tried to be a hero. He stepped into the barn entrance, both guns drawn, facing Emma across 20 feet of blood-stained dirt. "For you, Virgil," he shouted and fired. He was fast. Jeremiah had always said youth had speed on its side. But Emma was faster. And more importantly, she was accurate. Her shot took Johnny in the right shoulder, spinning him. Her second shot disarmed him, the bullet striking his revolver and sending it flying. He fell screaming, clutching his shattered arm. Emma walked past him without a second glance. He would live. That was more mercy than he deserved. Outside, she found Abigail and Benji, mounted and ready. She swung onto Copper with practiced ease, and together they rode hard for the mountain as the sun finally surrendered to darkness. Behind them, Miller's barn burned. Emma did not know who had set the fire. Maybe one of the Garretts in their panic. Maybe a knocked-over lantern. Maybe the barn itself, tired of hosting violence, had chosen its own ending. It did not matter. What mattered was Abigail and Benji were safe. What mattered was the Garrett Gang had learned that Emma Thornwood was not easy prey. What mattered was the phantom had returned. They rode through gathering darkness, the burning barn, a funeral pyre behind them. Nate caught up to them a mile out, his face pale but his eyes bright with the terrible thrill of surviving violence. "Miss Emma," he gasped. You fought like I have never seen anything like it." Emma did not slow. "We are not safe yet. They will pursue. How many did we kill? 3 dead for certain. Maybe 4. Virgil will not last the night with that kidney wound. Johnny is crippled but alive. The rest wounded or scattered. But they will regroup. Angry men are dangerous men." She was right. Within the hour, they heard horses behind them. Distant still, but coming. The Garretts, what remained of them, were giving chase. But Emma was leading them exactly where she wanted them, leading them into the mountain's embrace, leading them into terrain she had known since she was 6 years old, leading them into the dark where she was not prey, but predator. The first trap was simple. A wire stretched across the narrow trail at chest height for a man on horseback. The leading rider hit it at full gallop. The wire sang. The rider's scream cut short as he left his saddle and fell 40 feet into a ravine that Emma had known was there, but the Garretts did not. The second trap was older, a deadfall that Jeremiah had set 20 years ago and Emma had maintained ever since. She fired a single shot at a specific tree, hitting the hidden trigger. Logs and rocks cascaded down the slope, blocking the trail and separating the pursuit into 2 groups. The third trap was not a trap at all, just Emma's intimate knowledge of the mountain and its moods. She led them onto a false trail that looked solid, but was actually a thin crust over soft earth. 3 more horses went down their riders, thrown bones breaking on impact with frozen ground. By the time Emma, Abigail, Benji, and Nate reached her cabin, the pursuit had ended. Not because the Garretts had given up, but because they could not follow where she led without dying in the attempt. The mountain had chosen its side, and the mountain remembered. Inside the cabin with the door barred and rifles loaded, Abigail held her son and wept. Not from fear, from release, from the realization that they were alive when they should have been dead. Nate stared at Emma with new eyes, eyes that saw not a homesteader widow, but something else entirely. Something dangerous. Miss Thornwood, his voice shook slightly. That was not the fighting of someone who has lived a quiet life tending sheep. Emma was cleaning her Remingtons with practiced efficiency, checking each chamber, wiping each barrel. No, deputy, it was not. Who are you really? Before Emma could answer, hoofbeats outside. A single rider. Emma was at the window in an instant, rifle ready. But the rider wore no gun, carried a black bag. Doc Silas Pritchard. Emma opened the door. Doc dismounted with the stiffness of age and cold. He took in the scene with a practiced eye. Abigail's bruised face. Benji's terrified clutching of his mother. Nate's shell-shocked expression. Emma's bloody clothes and steady hands. Heard there was trouble at Miller's barn, Doc said mildly. Thought someone might need medical attention. Benji is fine, Emma said. Abigail has a split lip and bruising. Nothing serious. Doc nodded and began examining Abigail anyway because that was what doctors did. As he worked, he spoke quietly. Also heard that several riders came up this mountain pursuing you. Not all of them left. Some did not. Emma confirmed. Doc finished with Abigail and turned to Nate. Deputy Holloway, you look like a man with questions eating him alive. Best ask them before they poison you. Nate swallowed hard. Miss Emma, at Miller's barn, the way you moved, the precision, you have killed before. Many times. Emma set down the rifle she had been cleaning. Yes, the phantom, the legend. 12 kills across 4 territories. That is you. The room went still. Abigail looked up sharply. Doc merely nodded as if confirming what he had always suspected. Emma met Nate's eyes. Was me. I am trying very hard for it not to be me anymore. Why? Nate's voice carried genuine confusion. Every one of those 12 were criminals, murderers, the kind of men the law could not or would not touch. Because killing leaves marks, deputy. Not on the body, on the soul. And I made a promise to a good man that I would stop. That I would try to be something other than a weapon. But tonight, Nate pressed. Tonight you were a weapon again. Tonight I was a woman protecting innocence. There is a difference, is there? The question hung in the cold air. Emma had no answer that would satisfy him. Or herself. Doc Silas cleared his throat. Deputy, you want to know who Emma Thornwood really is? I will tell you. But you had best sit down. It is a long story and not a pleasant one. And there by lamplight, as the November wind howled outside and the mountain kept its vigil, Doc Silas Pritchard told the truth that Emma had carried for 20 years. Her name was Emma Gray. Found wandering the prairie in 1859 at age 6, the sole survivor when a Cheyenne raiding party attacked her family's wagon train. Parents dead, older brother dead, everyone dead. She walked for 3 days without water or food, alone on the endless grass until Jeremiah Blackwood found her. Jeremiah called Iron Eyes for his ability to see what others missed. The greatest scout the Army ever employed. A legend who had tracked Geronimo through the Apache Wars and lived to tell about it. He could have left Emma to die. Could have delivered her to an orphanage. Instead, he raised her as his own daughter. Taught her everything he knew. Made her into something the frontier had rarely seen. A woman who could survive anything the West could throw at her. In 1869, when Emma was 16, corrupt men came for the land Jeremiah protected. Men led by Samuel Garrett, who dealt in land fraud and murder with equal ease. Jeremiah tried legal means. The law failed. He tried standing in their way. They sent hired guns. 12 hired guns ambushed Jeremiah in a box canyon 30 miles south of here. Emma was with him. Watched him kill 7 of them before they finally brought him down. Watched him die, protecting her one final time, bringing down a rock slide that buried her and made the killers think she was dead too. She crawled out hours later, found Jeremiah in his last moments, held him as his blood soaked into the earth he had protected. His last words to her were simple. Finish it, but do not lose yourself to it. Emma spent 3 years hunting those 12 men, found them one by one, gave each a choice, surrender and testify against Samuel Garrett, or die. All 12 chose to draw. All 12 died. She became the Phantom, a ghost story told around campfires, a legend that frightened bad men into looking over their shoulders. Then she met James Thornwood, Jeremiah's nephew, a cavalry officer with an honest heart who knew about her past and loved her anyway. He made her promise to stop, to put down the guns and build a life worth living. She kept that promise for 6 years, until James died, until she found herself alone again on the mountain where Jeremiah had taught her everything. Doc finished his story and poured himself coffee from Emma's pot. The silence that followed was profound. Nate spoke first, his voice small. Those 12 men, they all deserved it. Everyone, Doc confirmed. I checked. Murderers. The kind of evil that walks on 2 legs. And now Nate looked at Emma. Are you the Phantom again? Emma stared into the fire. I do not know. I do not want to be. But the Garretts will not stop. And I will not let them hurt anyone else. Then we stop them, Nate said with sudden conviction. Together, legal or not, right is right, Deputy Emma said quietly. You risk your future saying that. Better than having no future because I stayed silent when I should have acted. Doc raised his coffee mug. I am too old to be scared of the Garretts. Count me in. Emma looked at these two men. One young and idealistic, one old and weary, both willing to stand beside her against what was coming. And what was coming would test them all. Because 50 miles south in a Helena hotel room, Samuel Garrett received a telegram that made him smile. Clay defeated. Phantom is real. Need you, V.P. Samuel folded the telegram carefully. He had been waiting 10 years for this. 10 years since Emma Gray had disappeared. 10 years of wondering if Jeremiah's daughter had died or merely vanished. Now he knew. She was alive, and she was exactly where he wanted her, on a mountain worth $250,000 in silver, a mountain he would take from her as payment for the humiliation Jeremiah had caused him a decade ago. He began writing telegrams to the territorial governor, to hired guns in 3 territories, to the artillery commander at Fort Shaw who owed him favors. This would not be a raid. This would be a siege. And when it was over, Jeremiah Blackwood's legacy would be buried forever beneath the mountain he had loved. Back on Blackfoot Ridge, Emma stood at her cabin window watching the darkness. Somewhere out there, worse was coming. But the mountain was on her side. The mountain remembered every lesson Jeremiah had taught, every trap he had set, every advantage that patience and preparation could provide. Let them come, Emma whispered to the night. Let them all come. The mountain is ready, and so am I. The night passed without sleep. Emma kept watch from her cabin window while Abigail and Benji, huddled by the fire exhaustion, finally claiming them near dawn. Nate had taken position in the barn loft, his Springfield rifle trained on the southern approach. Doc Silas dozed in a chair, his old Army revolver resting on his lap, ready despite his years. When the sun finally broke over the eastern peaks, painting the snow gold and crimson, Emma allowed herself to breathe. They had survived the night, but survival was not victory. It was merely postponement. She stepped outside into air so cold it burned her lungs. The mountains stood silent around her, patient and ancient. Somewhere down below, what remained of the Garrett Gang was licking wounds and planning revenge. But that was not what troubled Emma most. The remnants were dangerous but predictable, wounded animals that could be tracked and dealt with. It was the man behind them that kept Emma's hand near her rifle. Samuel Garrett, the architect of Jeremiah's death. A man who understood that true power came not from the fastest gun, but from patience, planning, and the willingness to use others as chess pieces. Emma had hunted 12 men to avenge Jeremiah, but she had never been able to touch Samuel. He was too well connected, too careful, too protected by layers of corrupt officials and hired killers. By the time she had worked her way up the chain of command, James had made her promise to stop, and she had kept that promise. Until now. Nate climbed down from the barn loft, his face drawn with fatigue. Miss Emma, we need to talk about what comes next. I know what comes next, Deputy. The Garretts regroup and come back with more men. We hold them off as long as we can. Eventually, we run out of ammunition or luck, whichever comes first. That is not a plan. That is a death sentence. Emma turned to face him, and for the first time since the night before, she allowed him to see the weight she carried. Deputy Holloway, I appreciate what you did last night. You saved lives, but you need to understand something. This fight was always going to end one way. With me or the Garretts dead. There is no middle ground, no negotiation, no surrender. Then we make sure it is them who end up dead, Nate said with the fierce conviction of youth. We have got right on our side. Right does not stop bullets, Emma said quietly. And it does not protect innocent people caught in the crossfire. Which is why Abigail and Benji need to leave. Today. Doc can escort them to Pine Valley and from there to Helena, where they will be safe. As if summoned by her name, Abigail appeared in the cabin doorway. Benji clung to her skirts, his young face still showing the terror of yesterday's ordeal. Abigail's lip was swollen, her eye blackening, but her spine was straight. We are not going, she said. Emma's jaw tightened. Abigail, this is not your fight. You made it my fight when you rode into that barn to save us. You made it my fight when you put yourself between my son and those animals. I will not repay that by running. Think of Benji. I am thinking of Benji. I am thinking that if we run now, we will be running forever. The Garretts will chase us to Helena, to San Francisco, to the ends of the earth, because men like that cannot stand to lose. Better to make our stand here with you, where we have got a chance, Emma wanted to argue. wanted to force them to leave for their own safety. But she saw the determination in Abigail's eyes and recognized it. The same stubborn courage that had gotten Jeremiah killed. The same refusal to let evil pass unchallenged. Fine, Emma said. But you do exactly what I tell you when I tell you. And at the first sign that this is going wrong, you take Benji and you run. No heroics, no looking back. Agreed, Abigail nodded. Agreed. Doc Silas emerged from the cabin, stretching his back with audible pops. Well, if we are all staying for the dance, we had best prepare the ballroom. Emma, you know this mountain better than anyone. Where do we make our stand? Emma was quiet for a long moment, her mind already working through terrain and tactics, calculating angles of fire and approaches, weighing the advantages of high ground against the vulnerability of being trapped. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the certainty of someone who had been preparing for this moment her entire life. Not here, she said. The cabin is too exposed, too many approaches. They could surround us, burn us out, or just wait until our supplies run dry. No, we make them come to us on ground of our choosing, where Nate asked was the old logging camp, 2 miles northeast. Higher elevation single approach, good sight lines, and it backs up against sheer cliff face so they cannot flank us from behind. Jeremiah and I used to train there. Every inch of that ground has been prepared for exactly this kind of fight. Prepared how, Doc asked. Traps, deadfalls, snares, firing positions. Even a few surprises Jeremiah set up 20 years ago that are still functional. If the Garretts want this mountain, they will have to pay in blood for every foot of it. They spent the morning preparing to move. Emma selected weapons and ammunition with care, packing only what they could carry without being slowed down. The rest she cached in hidden locations around the mountain insurance against the possibility that they might need to fall back and resupply. As she worked, her mind kept returning to the same question. How many men would Samuel send? The gang had brought 15 to Miller's barn and lost at least 7. Samuel would not make the same mistake. He would come with overwhelming force, enough guns to ensure no possibility of failure. 30 men, Emma estimated. Maybe more. And Samuel Garrett himself would be with them because this was personal now. Not just business, but revenge. The daughter of the man who had humiliated him a decade ago, sitting on land worth a fortune, protected only by her skill and the mountain that had raised her. It should have been terrifying. Instead, Emma felt a strange calm settle over her. This was what Jeremiah had prepared her for. Not just the mechanics of combat, but the mental clarity needed to face impossible odds without flinching. She was ready. By noon, they were packed and moving toward the logging camp. Emma led reading sign and checking sight lines with automatic precision. Nate followed with Abigail and Benji mounted on a single horse. Doc brought up the rear, his old eyes scanning for pursuit. They had traveled perhaps a mile when Emma raised her fist, signaling a halt. Everyone froze. For 30 seconds, there was no sound but the wind through the pines and the nervous stamping of horses. Then Emma heard it again. The sound that had stopped her. A horse nickering in the distance. South and west. Too far to be an immediate threat, but close enough to matter. Someone is following us, she said quietly. The Garrett's knee. Nate asked, his hand moving to his rifle. Emma shook her head. Wrong direction, and only one horse. What is left of the gang would not send a lone rider. Then who? Emma dismounted and handed Copper's reins to Nate. Stay here. If I am not back in 10 minutes, continue to the logging camp. Do not wait for me. Before anyone could protest, Emma melted into the trees with the silence of a hunting cat. She moved through the forest the way Jeremiah had taught her, each step placed with care, using the terrain to mask her presence. A city person would have made enough noise to be heard 100 yards away. Emma made no more sound than falling snow. She found the rider 5 minutes later, approaching from the southwest along a game trail Emma herself had used 1,000 times. He sat tall in the saddle despite the difficult terrain, moving with the confidence of a man who knew wilderness intimacy. Red hair and a thick beard shot through with gray. Weathered face marked by years of sun and wind. Scottish features that spoke of Highland ancestry. And eyes that never stopped moving, reading the forest like a book written in tracks and broken branches. Emma stepped out from behind a pine with her rifle leveled at his chest. He stopped his horse but did not reach for the gun at his hip. Instead, he raised his hands slowly, palms out, showing them empty. Easy there, miss. I come in peace. Who are you and why are you following me? The man smiled, though it did not quite reach his eyes. Name is Ezra Calloway. Folks call me Trax, and I have been following you for the better part of 5 years, though you only noticed me in the last mile. Got to say, that is impressive. Most people never spot me at all. Emma's finger tightened on the trigger. You are a bounty hunter. Guilty as charged. Been hunting the Phantom since word reached Cheyenne about the legend who never missed and never showed mercy. $1,000 in Wyoming territory for information leading to capture. Dead or alive, though I always preferred alive. More sporting that way. Then you wasted your time. I am just a widow trying to tend sheep. Trax laughed a genuine sound of appreciation. Oh, that is good. That is real good, except I was watching through a spyglass yesterday evening when you shot up Miller's barn. Saw the whole thing. The way you moved, the precision, the tactics. I recognized them immediately. Recognized what Trax's expression shifted, becoming something close to reverent. The fighting style of Jeremiah Iron Eyes Blackwood. Only one man ever fought like that, and he has been dead 10 years, which means he taught someone else. Taught them so well they became a legend in their own right. Emma said nothing, but her silence was confirmation enough. I wondered for years who the Phantom really was. Trax continued. 12 kills across 4 territories, all criminals, all clean shots, all unsolved. Then the kills stopped 3 years ago, right when a young woman named Emma Thornwood appeared in Montana and bought herself a mountain. Seemed like quite a coincidence. What do you want? Trax looked at her for a long moment. Then he slowly reached into his coat. Emma's rifle came up higher, but he moved with deliberate care, producing not a weapon but a faded photograph. He held it out to her. Emma took it with her free hand, keeping the rifle steady with her right. The photograph showed a much younger Trax, maybe 17, standing beside a tall man with gray eyes that seemed to look right through the camera. Jeremiah Blackwood. Emma's breath caught. Summer of 1863. Trax said quietly, I was a kid playing at being a Union scout. Got separated from my regiment outside Gettysburg. 3 Confederate raiders caught me. They were going to slit my throat and leave me in a ditch. Then that man appeared out of nowhere. Killed 2 before I could blink. Scared the 3rd so bad he ran all the way back to Virginia. Jeremiah saved your life. He did more than that. He looked at me, this stupid kid who had nearly gotten himself killed, and he said, you got yourself another chance, son. Use it right. Make it count. Then he disappeared back into the woods like a ghost. Trax wiped his eyes, not ashamed of the moisture there. I spent the next 15 years becoming the best tracker in the territories, honoring that second chance he gave me. When I heard Jeremiah Blackwood was murdered in '69, I tried to find who did it. Trail went cold. Then the Phantom appeared, and I started to suspect. Started to think maybe his daughter had finished what those killers started. So you hunted me for 5 years to collect a bounty. I hunted you for 5 years to figure out if you were worth the legend. Trax smiled. Turns out you are. Which brings me to why I am here. I know who killed Jeremiah Blackwood, Samuel Garrett, and I know he is coming for you right now, with 30 guns and artillery pieces he requisitioned from Fort Shaw. Emma's eyes narrowed. How do you know that? Because I was in Helena 2 days ago when Samuel sent those telegrams. I make it my business to know what powerful men are planning. And when I heard he was coming after Emma Thornwood, I knew. I knew it was you, and I knew Jeremiah Blackwood would want someone to stand with his daughter when she faced the man who murdered him. You are asking to help me after spending 5 years hunting me. I am asking to pay the debt I owe Jeremiah Blackwood. The debt I have owed for 22 years. $1,000 in bounty money cannot buy that kind of peace. But helping his daughter kill the son of a bitch who murdered him, that might start to balance the scales. Emma studied him for a long moment. Every instinct Jeremiah had trained into her said this could be a trap. That trusting a bounty hunter was madness. But she also saw something in Trax Calloway's eyes. The same thing she saw in her own mirror. The weight of debts that could never be fully repaid. The need to stand for something bigger than survival. She lowered her rifle. The bounty is still good in Wyoming. After this is done, if we are both alive, you could still collect it. Trax shook his head. After this is done, if we are both alive, I am going to buy you a whiskey and toast Jeremiah Blackwood's memory. The bounty can hang. Some things matter more than money. Emma felt something loosen in her chest. Not quite trust, but the beginning of it. She extended her hand. Welcome to the losing side, Mr. Calloway. Trax shook it firmly. Would not have it any other way, Miss Gray. They rode back to where the others waited together. Nate's hand was on his rifle when they emerged from the trees, but he relaxed when he saw Emma was unharmed. Everyone meet Ezra Trax Calloway, Emma said. He is a bounty hunter who has been chasing me for 5 years, and apparently he is on our side now. Doc Silas raised an eyebrow. Bounty hunter seems like an odd choice for an ally. Trax dismounted and dipped his head respectfully to Doc. I have been called worse by better people, sir, but I owe Jeremiah Blackwood a debt. His daughter seems inclined to let me repay it. Nate looked between them, confusion written on his young face. I do not understand. If you knew Miss Emma was the Phantom, why not turn her in? Because the Phantom only killed men who needed killing, Trax said simply. And because Jeremiah Blackwood saved my life when I was not much older than you are now, Deputy. That kind of debt does not expire just because collecting a bounty would be easier. They reached the old logging camp by mid-afternoon. The site was exactly as Emma remembered it. A clearing perhaps 100 yards across surrounded by dense pine forest on three sides. The fourth side dropped away into a sheer cliff that fell 200 feet to jagged rocks below. A single narrow trail provided access winding up the mountainside in a series of switchbacks that would force any attacking force to approach in single file. Perfect killing ground, Trax observed, sweeping his practiced eye over the terrain. Your father taught you well. He taught me to survive, Emma said. Everything else followed from that. They spent the rest of the day fortifying their position. Emma showed them where Jeremiah had placed deadfalls and snares 20 years ago, traps that still functioned because he had built them to last. They added new ones using techniques Jeremiah had taught Emma during those long years of training. Wire snares strung at throat height across the trail at 3 different points. Covered pits with sharpened stakes at the bottom. Loose rocks positioned to create avalanches with a single well-placed shot. False trails that led to cliff edges hidden by snow and shadow. As they worked, Nate kept glancing at Emma with something like awe. Miss Emma, how did you learn all this? My father started teaching me when I was 6 years old, Emma said, driving a stake into frozen ground with economical strikes of a hammer. By the time I was 10, I could track a deer through snow, set a snare that would hold a bear, and shoot the eye out of a hawk at 100 yards. By 15, I could do all that and more. Jeremiah said if you were going to survive on the frontier, you needed to be better than good. You needed to be exceptional. And the fighting, the way you moved at Miller's barn. Emma paused in her work. That came later, after Jeremiah was killed. I realized knowing how to survive was not enough. I needed to know how to fight, how to end threats before they ended me. So I took everything he taught me about tracking and hunting, and I applied it to men instead of animals. That is cold, Nate said quietly. That is survival, Emma corrected. Men like the Garretts do not respect mercy. They respect force. And if you are not willing to use force when it matters, then all your good intentions mean nothing. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold, they gathered around a small fire. Emma had positioned it in a depression where the flames would not be visible from below, but the smoke would disperse through the pine canopy. Warmth without advertisement. Doc Silas checked his rifle for the 10th time. How long do you think before they come tomorrow, Emma said with certainty. Maybe the day after, if Samuel wants to be cautious. But not longer than that. He has a deadline. What deadline, Nate asked. Emma pulled out the papers she had taken from one of the wounded Garretts during the chaos at Miller's barn. She had not mentioned them to the others yet, wanting time to study them first. Now she spread them out by the firelight. Samuel Garrett has a contract with Territorial Governor Whitfield, she explained. Partnership agreement for railroad expansion through Montana. But there is a clause. If Samuel does not secure this land by December 1st, the contract is void and he forfeits $200,000. Trax whistled low. That is a fortune. When is December 1st? 2 days from now, Emma said. November 22nd, which means Samuel is running out of time. He will come with everything he has and he will come soon. The fire crackled in the silence that followed. Abigail held Benji close, the boy finally sleeping, despite the cold and fear. Nate cleaned his rifle with nervous energy. Doc stared into the flames, perhaps remembering other battles from his youth. Trax checked his ammunition with the methodical care of a professional. And Emma thought about tomorrow, about the violence that was coming, about the choice she had made when she pulled those triggers at Miller's barn. She had promised James she would stop killing, had promised herself she could live a quiet life tending sheep and letting the past stay buried. But the past never stayed buried. Not on the frontier, not when men like Samuel Garrett walked free, while men like Jeremiah Blackwood lay cold in the ground. I need to tell you all something, Emma said quietly, about who we are facing tomorrow, about Samuel Garrett and why this is about more than just land. They turned to her faces shadowed by firelight, and Emma told them the full story. Not the sanitized version Doc had given Nate, but the brutal truth of what had happened in that box canyon 10 years ago. She told them about Jeremiah's last stand, about watching him kill 7 men while wounded and knowing it still was not enough, about the rock slide that buried her and saved her life while taking his, about crawling out hours later to find him dying, his blood turning the snow black under the moonlight. She told them about his last words, about the promise she made, about the 3 years she spent hunting 12 men across 4 territories, giving each the same choice Jeremiah would have given them: surrender or die. All 12 chose to die. She told them about James Thornwood and the promise that had made her stop. About 6 years of peace that felt like a betrayal of everything Jeremiah had died for. About the riding accident that took James and left her alone with her ghosts. And finally, she told them about Samuel Garrett, about the man who had ordered Jeremiah's death and profited from it, about how he had evaded justice through connections and corruption, about how tomorrow he would come to finish what he started a decade ago, bringing overwhelming force to crush the last remnant of Jeremiah Blackwood's legacy. When Emma finished speaking, the fire had burned low. The stars overhead burned cold and distant. Somewhere an owl called hunting in the darkness. Nate spoke first. "We cannot win this, not against 30 men and artillery." "No," Emma agreed, "we probably cannot, which is why I am giving all of you one last chance to leave. Ride out tonight while you still can. Make for Helena and do not look back. I will not think less of you for choosing life over a hopeless fight." Trax shook his head. "I did not ride all this way to leave before the dance starts. I am staying." Doc Silas checked his revolver one more time. "I am too old to start running from bullies now. I am staying too." Abigail spoke quietly, her hand stroking Benji's sleeping head. "My husband died because men like the Garretts wanted our land and saw no reason to pay for it. They beat him to death in front of me and told me I should be grateful they let me live. I am done running. I am done being afraid. I am staying and I am fighting." Emma looked at Nate. Deputy Nate met her eyes. "I took an oath to uphold justice. Real justice, not the corrupt mockery Sheriff Daltrey represents. If I ride away now, that oath means nothing. I am staying, Miss Emma. And whatever happens tomorrow, at least I will know I stood for something that mattered." Emma felt her throat tighten with emotion she could not afford to show. "You are all fools." "Probably," Doc agreed. "But we are fools together. That counts for something." They settled in for the night, taking turns on watch. Emma took the first shift, her eyes scanning the darkness while her mind wandered through memories. Jeremiah teaching her to track. James asking her to marry him. The faces of 12 men in the moment before they chose to draw and die. The weight of promises made and broken and made again. Somewhere below in the darkness, Samuel Garrett was coming, bringing fire and iron and the promise of death. Coming to claim the mountain and erase the last trace of the man who had humiliated him. But the mountain was not undefended. And Emma Gray was not the frightened 6-year-old who had watched her family die. She was something far more dangerous now. Something Jeremiah had forged from grief and necessity. Something that men like Samuel Garrett would learn to fear before the end. The Phantom of Blackfoot Ridge was done hiding, done running, done trying to be anything other than what she had been trained to be. Tomorrow would bring violence and death and choices that could not be unmade. But tonight, Emma stood watch over people worth protecting, and that would have to be enough. The stars wheeled overhead. The wind whispered through the pines, and Emma waited for the dawn that would bring reckoning. They had been in the cave perhaps 2 hours when Trax returned from a scouting mission through one of the tunnel exits Emma had shown him. His face was grim. "Clayton Garrett is still alive," he reported. "Saw him leading a search party near the southern caves. He is wounded but walking. Looks like he took shrapnel from something. Moving slow." "How many men with him?" Emma asked. 5, maybe 6. "They are spreading out, searching every crevice they can find." Emma made a decision. If Clayton found the caves, he would eventually find them. And 5 or 6 men in these narrow passages would be harder to fight than 30 in the open. Better to end the threat while she had the advantage. "I am going out there," Emma said quietly. "Going to end this." Nate started to protest, but Emma cut him off. "Clayton has to die, not for revenge, but because as long as he lives, Samuel has a lieutenant who knows this mountain almost as well as I do now. Someone who will keep hunting us. Someone who will not stop." She took only her Remington and a knife, moved through the tunnels with Trax guiding her to where he had spotted Clayton's group. They emerged near Cooper's Ravine, the same place where one of the first pursuers had died 2 nights ago. Clayton and his men were searching the rocks 50 yards away. Emma could see the blood soaking through his shirt on the left side. Whatever had hit him had hurt worse than it looked. He was pale, sweating despite the cold, moving with the careful stiffness of a man in serious pain. She could have shot him from cover. Easy kill, clean. But Jeremiah's voice echoed in her mind. Mercy before violence. Always offer the choice. Emma stepped into the open, both hands visible and empty. "Clayton," he spun his men, raising rifles. But Clayton held up a hand, stopping them. His gold tooth flashed in a pained smile. "The widow." I wondered when you would show yourself. This ends now, Clayton. You and your men ride away, or you die here. Those are your only choices." Clayton laughed, then winced from the pain it caused. "You know I cannot do that. Uncle Samuel would kill me himself if I came back empty-handed. He already thinks I am useless. Hell, he paid me half what he paid the others. Did you know that his own nephew and he values me at half a hired gun?" Emma's eyes narrowed. "Then he is using you, same as he used those 12 men who killed Jeremiah, same as he uses everyone. Walk away, Clayton. Disappear. Start over somewhere. Samuel Garrett cannot find you." For a moment, something flickered in Clayton's eyes. Doubt, fear, the realization that he had always been disposable to the man he served. Then his pride reasserted itself. "I am Clayton Garrett. I have killed 23 men. I do not run from women." His hand dropped toward his gun. Emma was faster. The Remington spoke once. Clayton's fancy Colt Navy never cleared leather. He looked down at the red spreading across his chest just above the shrapnel wound, then up at Emma with something like wonder. "You were right," he whispered, blood on his lips. "About Samuel. He was always going to kill me, too. Said I was too stupid to keep alive. Too much of a liability. Joke's on him, though. I am dying free of that bastard." He fell to his knees, then forward onto his face in the frozen dirt. His 5 men looked at each other, then at Emma, then at their dead boss lying in the snow. Without a word, they mounted their horses and rode away. Fast, not looking back. Emma stood over Clayton's body for a long moment. Felt nothing, no satisfaction, no regret. Just the cold certainty that one more threat had been eliminated. One more piece removed from Samuel's board. She dragged his body to the ravine edge and let it fall. The same ravine that had claimed one of his men 2 nights ago. Let the mountain have him. When she returned to the cave, she said only 3 words to the waiting group. "Clayton is dead." Nate looked like he wanted to ask how, but the expression on Emma's face stopped him. "Good track," said simply. "One less gun between us and Samuel, and one less man who knew this terrain." Emma nodded. "Now we wait for nightfall. And then we finish what Jeremiah started 10 years ago." Dawn came cold and merciless on November 21st, 1879. Emma stood at the edge of the logging camp watching the sun paint the eastern peaks in shades of copper and blood. Beautiful. Deceptive. The kind of morning that made men forget how quickly beauty could turn to horror. Trax appeared beside her, moving with the silence of long practice. His breath formed clouds in the frigid air. "They are coming." Spotted dust rising from the valley floor about an hour ago. Maybe 30 riders. And something else. Emma's jaw tightened. "Wagons? 2 of them. Heavy ones judging by how slow they are moving. Could be supplies, but my gut says artillery." Emma closed her eyes briefly. She had hoped Samuel would be arrogant enough to rely on numbers alone. Artillery changed everything. Changed a defensible position into a death trap. Changed a fighting chance into an execution. How long until they reach us? 3 hours if they push hard. 4 if they are cautious. Samuel strikes me as a cautious man. Then we have 3 hours to finish preparations and decide if we are staying or running. Trax studied her profile. "You already decided to stay. I can see it in your eyes." Emma turned to face him. "I decided to stay the moment I pulled those triggers at Miller's barn. Everything after that is just consequence." They roused the others. Abigail woke instantly, the alertness of a woman who had learned that sleep could be dangerous. She checked Benji, still mercifully asleep, then began preparing what passed for breakfast. Hard biscuits and coffee so strong it could strip paint. Frontier fuel. Nate emerged from his bedroll looking younger than his 24 years, fear and determination warring on his face. Doc Silas moved with the stiffness of age and old wounds, but his hands were steady as he checked his weapons. "They are coming," Emma said without preamble. 30 men, 2 artillery pieces, 3 to 4 hours out. Abigail's hand trembled slightly as she poured coffee, but her voice remained steady. "What do we do?" "We finish preparing the kill zones. We wait. And when they come, we make them pay for every inch of this mountain." The next 3 hours passed in a blur of final preparations. Emma positioned them with tactical precision born from Jeremiah's teachings. Trax took the high ground on the eastern ridge 600 yards from the main approach. His skill with a rifle at distance would let him harass the attackers before they even knew where the shots were coming from. Nate occupied a fortified position behind stacked logs on the northern edge of the clearing, controlling any secondary approach. His Springfield rifle might not match Trax for distance, but it would stop any flanking attempt cold. Doc Silas stationed himself at the small cabin they had reinforced overnight, the central position with the best protection. His role was less about killing and more about keeping them alive when the bullets started flying. A field surgeon who could shoot was worth his weight in gold. Abigail, despite her protests, Emma positioned in the safest spot available, a depression behind the cabin with a clear escape route down the mountain. Her job was simple. If things went wrong, she took Benji and ran. No hesitation, no looking back. Emma herself would be mobile, moving between positions as needed, coordinating their defense and responding to threats as they developed. The way Jeremiah had taught her, never static, never predictable. As the sun climbed toward noon, they heard the first sounds. Horses, many horses, the jingle of harness and the creak of wagon wheels. Men's voices calling to each other, confident and careless. They thought this would be easy, thought overwhelming force meant inevitable victory. They were about to learn otherwise. Samuel Garrett appeared first, riding a magnificent black stallion that probably cost more than most men earned in a year. He sat tall in the saddle, silver hair gleaming beneath an expensive hat. Even from 400 yards, Emma could see the cold intelligence in his eyes. This was not crude brutality. This was something far more dangerous. Calculated malice wrapped in civilized manners. Behind Samuel came what remained of his nephew's gang. Perhaps 10 men who had survived Miller's barn and the mountain chase and Clayton's death. Their faces showed the hard set of men who had been humiliated and wanted revenge. Dangerous but predictable. The rest were hired guns. Professional killers drawn from 3 territories by Samuel's money and the promise of easy work. 20 men who fought for pay rather than passion. These were the ones Emma worried about most. Professionals could be ruthless in ways amateurs never managed. And at the rear of the 2 wagons, heavy canvas covered their cargo, but Emma knew what lay beneath. 12-pound mountain howitzers. Artillery pieces designed to be broken down and transported through rough terrain. Small enough to be mobile, large enough to reduce a fortified position to splinters and screaming. Samuel raised his hand, halting the column at the base of the trail leading to the logging camp. He sat motionless for a long moment, studying the terrain with the eye of a man who understood battlefields. Emma could almost see him calculating angles of approach, fields of fire, defensive positions. Then his voice rang out, amplified by a speaking trumpet. One of his men handed him. Emma Gray, I know you are up there. I know who you are and what you have done. There is no point in hiding. Emma remained still and silent. Let him talk. Let him waste time and breath. I am offering you one chance, Samuel continued. One opportunity to end this without bloodshed. Walk down this mountain with your deed signed over to me, and you live. You have my word as a gentleman. Trax snorted quietly from his position. Samuel Garrett's word as a gentleman, that is rich. Everyone with you lives as well, Samuel called. The deputy, the doctor, the widow and her boy. All of you walk away if you surrender now. Emma felt Nate's eyes on her from his position. Felt the question hanging in the cold air. What if he means it? What if surrender actually saves lives? But Emma knew better. She had seen what Samuel did to people who stood in his way. Had held Jeremiah while he died from Samuel's bullets. Surrender meant signing the deed and then disappearing into an unmarked grave somewhere on this mountain. All of them. No witnesses, no loose ends. Samuel waited a full minute for a response that did not come. Then his voice changed, losing the false courtesy and revealing the iron beneath. Very well, you have made your choice. I gave you mercy and you spat on it. What happens next is on your head, Emma Gray. Every drop of blood, every scream. Remember that when you watch your friends die. He lowered the speaking trumpet and turned to his men. Emma could not hear his orders from this distance, but she saw the results. 10 men dismounted and began moving up the trail in a staggered column, testing the defenses, probing for traps. They found the first wire snare at 200 yards. The lead man's scream cut short as the wire caught him across the throat, the momentum of his uphill climb adding lethal force to the impact. He went down, thrashing, drowning in his own blood. The column halted, bunched up, perfect. Emma raised her Winchester and fired a single shot at a specific tree branch overhanging the trail. The branch, already weakened by careful cutting the day before, snapped cleanly. The deadfall it had been holding released. 200 pounds of logs and rocks cascaded down the narrow trail. 2 men died instantly, crushed beneath the avalanche. 3 more went over the edge, their screams echoing until they hit bottom 200 feet below. The survivors scattered, abandoning formation, seeking any cover they could find. Trax opened fire from his distant position. 600 yards was long range even for an expert, but Trax was beyond expert. His first shot took a man through the chest. His second shattered another's legs, sending him tumbling down the slope. His third missed, but the psychological impact of shots coming from an unknown position was almost as effective as hits. The assault broke. The survivors retreated in disorder, leaving their dead and wounded behind. First blood to the defenders, but Emma took no satisfaction in it. This was just the opening move. Samuel was testing them, learning their capabilities, identifying their positions. The real attack would come next. Samuel gathered his men at the base of the trail, well out of rifle range. Emma could see him gesturing, pointing, organizing. 20 minutes later, the artillery pieces were being positioned, not to fire up the trail, which was too narrow and winding, but to lob shells over the intervening terrain directly into the logging camp. Indirect fire, devastating and nearly impossible to counter without artillery of their own. Everyone to the reinforced positions, Emma called. They are going to shell us. The first cannon roared. Armnauer. The shell arced overhead with a sound like tearing canvas, then exploded 40 yards short of the cabin. Frozen earth and shattered pine erupted skyward. The concussion wave hit like a physical blow even at that distance. The second cannon fired. This shell came closer, landing at the edge of the clearing. Shrapnel screamed through the air, shredding trees and sending splinters flying like knives. They are ranging us, Doc called from his position. Next salvo will hit. He was right. The third and fourth shots bracketed the cabin, one falling just short, the other just long. The bombardment crew now had their target precisely located. The next shells would fall directly on their positions. Emma made a decision born of desperation and the memory of something Jeremiah had told her years ago. When the enemy has superior firepower, you do not try to match it. You eliminate it. Track, she called. Can you hit the artillery crews from your position? 600 yards to moving targets. That is asking a lot, I know, but it is the only chance we have. Track settled into his shooting position, his rifle braced on a log. He fired. A man near the left cannon spun and fell. Track's worked, the bolt aimed, fired again. The other gun crew scattered, seeking cover. But it was not enough. More men rushed forward to replace the casualties. The cannons fired again, and this time the shells found their mark. One exploded directly in front of the cabin, blowing apart the log wall Doc had been sheltering behind. The doctor went down, blood streaming from a dozen splinter wounds across his face and arms. The second shell hit near the northern position where Nate crouched. The young deputy disappeared in smoke and flying debris. Emma's heart stopped. Then Nate emerged from the cloud, deafened and bleeding from his ears, but alive, stumbling toward better cover. They cannot sustain this, Trax called. We have to move or die. Emma knew he was right, but moving meant abandoning their prepared positions, meant giving up the terrain advantage, meant fighting in the open where Samuel's numbers would overwhelm them. Unless the escape route Jeremiah had prepared 20 years ago, the one Emma had maintained but never thought she would need, a narrow path down the cliff face hidden behind a rockfall leading to a cave system that connected to 3 different exits on the mountain. It would mean leaving everything behind, would mean running instead of fighting, but it would keep them alive. Get everyone to the eastern edge, Emma ordered. There is a way down. Follow me and stay close. They moved through smoke and chaos as the cannons continued their methodical destruction of the logging camp. Doc Silas limped, supported by Nate, blood still streaming from the splinter wounds on his face. Abigail carried Benji, the boy finally awake and crying with terror. Trax provided covering fire, his rifle barking steadily as he discouraged any pursuit. Emma led them to what looked like solid rock face. But when she pressed a specific stone, a section of the apparent wall swung inward, revealing a narrow gap. Jeremiah's final gift. An escape route only those who knew could find. Inside, she called. Everyone inside now. They squeezed through one by one. The cave beyond was dark and cold, but it was shelter, safety, life. Emma was the last through. As she pulled the hidden door closed behind her, she looked back at the logging camp. Flames were rising from the shattered cabin. Samuel's men were advancing up the trail, now emboldened by the artillery barrage, thinking victory was at hand. Let them think it. Let them believe they had won. The mountain had other lessons to teach. Emma led her people deeper into the cave system, using a torch made from pitch-soaked cloth. The passages were narrow, twisting, dropping, and rising in ways that would disorient anyone who did not know them intimately. But Emma had explored these caves as a child with Jeremiah, had memorized every turn, every junction, every hidden chamber. After 20 minutes of careful descent, they emerged into a larger cavern. Natural light filtered in from cracks in the ceiling. An underground stream provided water. This was Jeremiah's true sanctuary, the place he had prepared for the day when running was the only option left. Supplies were cached here in waterproof containers, ammunition, food, medical supplies, blankets, everything needed to survive while enemies exhausted themselves searching above. Doc Silas collapsed against the cave wall, breathing hard, dabbing at the blood on his face with a handkerchief. We cannot hide forever. Emma knelt beside the stream, filling canteens with cold, clear water. We are not hiding. We are waiting. For what Nate asked, for nightfall, for Samuel to think he has won, for his men to relax their guard and celebrate their victory. Emma's smile was cold and hard, and then we are going to teach them why Jeremiah Blackwood was the most feared name on the frontier. As the day wore on, they rested and tended their wounds. Doc's injuries were superficial despite all the blood. Nate had a concussion and ringing ears, but would recover. Abigail and Benji were physically unharmed, though the psychological scars would take longer to heal. Emma spent the time checking weapons and planning. Not just planning the next move, but thinking 3 and 4 moves ahead, the way Jeremiah had taught her. Samuel would occupy the logging camp, would post sentries, would send men to search for bodies or survivors. All predictable, all exploitable. As darkness fell outside, Emma gathered them together. Tonight we take the fight to them. Not a frontal assault, that would be suicide, but surgical strikes. Sentries eliminated silently. Supplies destroyed. Confusion and fear sown. That is assassination, Nate said quietly. That is war, Emma corrected. And Samuel brought it to this mountain. Now he gets to learn what fighting on Jeremiah Blackwood's ground really means. Trax checked his knives, his face grim. I am with you. What is the plan? Emma outlined it quickly. She and Trax would move through the darkness using the cave system to emerge at different points around the logging camp. They would take down sentries, set fires, create chaos. Make Samuel's men afraid of every shadow, every sound, every moment of darkness. The others would remain in the cave where it was safe. No arguments, no exceptions. What about Samuel himself, Doc asked. If you get a clear shot, Emma's expression was unreadable. Samuel Garrett has evaded justice for 10 years. If I get a clear shot, I will offer him the same choice I offered those 12 men. Surrender or die, and I will honor whatever choice he makes. Even after everything he has done, even after Jeremiah. Especially because of Jeremiah. He taught me that mercy is not weakness, that offering someone a chance to do the right thing matters even if they refuse. I will not dishonor his memory by becoming the same kind of monster Samuel is. They waited until full dark. Then Emma and Trax slipped out through a different cave exit emerging a quarter mile from the logging camp. The night was moonless, cold enough to freeze spit before it hit the ground. Perfect conditions for what they had to do. They moved like ghosts through the pine forest. Emma led reading the terrain by feel and memory. Trax followed his hunter's instincts, letting him match her silence step for step. The first sentry died without ever knowing they were there. Trax's knife took him from behind, one hand clamping over his mouth while the other opened his throat. Quick, quiet. Necessary. The second sentry was more alert, but alertness without the right training only meant he died confused instead of surprised. Emma's garrote wire went around his neck. 20 seconds of struggle, then stillness. They cached the bodies in brush and moved on. At the camp itself, they found Samuel's men settling in for the night. Fires burned. Men laughed and passed bottles celebrating their easy victory. The artillery pieces stood unmanned, the crews confident no threat remained. Emma and Trax exchanged glances. Then they went to work. Emma approached the ammunition wagon from downwind, a skill Jeremiah had drilled into her until it became instinct. Never approach anything from upwind. Never let your scent announce you. She placed a slow-burning fuse among the powder kegs, one that would give her time to be far away when it ignited. Trax, meanwhile, had found the horse corral. He did not harm the animals. Jeremiah would have disapproved of that. But he cut the ropes and fired a single shot into the air. The horses bolted in every direction, scattering into the night. The camp erupted in confusion. Men grabbed weapons, shouting contradictory orders. Some ran after the horses. Others formed defensive positions against an attack that was not coming. And then the ammunition wagon exploded. The blast lit the night like a second sun. Flaming debris arced through the darkness. Men screamed. The concussion knocked down tents and scattered gear across the clearing. In the chaos, Emma and Trax disappeared back into the forest, leaving nothing behind but death and fear. They returned to the cave to find the others waiting anxiously. The explosion had been audible even through solid rock. Did it work? Nate asked. Emma nodded. They lost their ammunition reserves, most of their horses, and at least 4 men in the blast. More importantly, they lost their confidence. Right now, every man in that camp is jumping at shadows and wondering if we are coming for them next. Are we? Emma smiled without warmth. Oh yes, Deputy, we are. But not tonight. Tonight we let them exhaust themselves, staying alert. Tomorrow we end this. They slept in shifts, always one person on watch, even in the safety of the cave. Emma took the pre-dawn shift, sitting near the entrance and watching stars fade as morning approached. She thought about Jeremiah, about James, about the promises she had made and broken and made again. about the 14 men she had killed and the dozen more who had died on this mountain in the past 3 days. The price of justice was supposed to be paid in courtrooms and legal proceedings. But on the frontier, justice often came down to who was willing to pull a trigger and who was not. Samuel Garrett had been pulling triggers literal and figurative for decades. It was past time someone pulled back. Dawn came gray and cold. Emma roused the others and outlined the final phase. Today they would not run or hide. Today they would face Samuel Garrett in the open and end the threat he represented once and for all. But they would do it on Emma's terms, on Jeremiah's ground, with every advantage the mountain could provide. They emerged from the cave as the sun cleared the eastern peaks, but they did not walk openly toward the logging camp. Instead, Emma led them to a different position, a rocky outcrop that overlooked the trail Samuel would have to use to descend the mountain, because Samuel Garrett was not staying. Emma could read the signs, even from a distance. The camp was being broken down. The remaining horses gathered. Samuel had concluded that Emma was dead or gone, and he was preparing to leave with whatever men he had left. But he would have to come down the mountain, and there was only one trail wide enough for the artillery wagons. "We wait here," Emma said. "Let them come to us." It took 2 hours. Samuel's column finally appeared, moving slowly down the narrow trail. The artillery wagons in the center, protected by armed men front and rear. Perhaps 20 men left, maybe less. The mountain had taken its toll. Samuel himself rode at the front, that same black stallion, his silver hair catching the morning light. Emma and her allies were positioned in the rocks above the trail. Perfect ambush position, tracks on the high point with his rifle. Nate and Doc to either barn, even Abigail, who had insisted on being armed, though Emma had positioned her and Benji furthest back. Emma herself stood and called down to the column. "Samuel Garrett." The column halted. Confusion rippled through the men. Samuel looked up, his eyes finding Emma among the rocks. "Emma Gray," he said, and something that might have been respect entered his voice. "Jeremiah's daughter. I should have killed you 10 years ago when I killed him." Emma's voice carried clear and cold. "You should have, but you did not. And now here we are." "You cannot win this," Samuel said. "Even from up there, we still have numbers." "Do you?" Emma gestured to the rocks around her where her allies waited hidden. "You have 20 frightened men who have watched their friends die on this mountain for 3 days. Men who know every shadow might hide a bullet. Men who want nothing more than to leave this cursed place alive." Samuel's jaw tightened. "What do you want? One last chance, Mr. Garrett. Ride away. Leave Montana Territory. Never come back. And this ends without more blood." Samuel's face twisted with something between rage and fear. "Never. This land is mine. It has always been mine. Your father tried to stop progress 10 years ago and died for it. You will die the same way." "Then draw," Emma said quietly, "because I am not moving. And neither is this mountain." Samuel's hand dropped to his gun. But before he could draw, a new sound rolled up the valley. Hoofbeats, many hoofbeats, and voices calling out. Emma looked down the trail and saw something that stopped her breath. Riders, 30 or more, coming up from Pine Valley. And at their head, wearing a deputy's badge that gleamed in the morning sun, rode a bloodied but unbowed Sheriff Daltrey. Behind him came Thaddeus Rutherford from the general store, rifle in hand. Caleb Whitmore and his sons. Miners from Pine Valley, homesteaders. "Families!" Miss Thornwood Daltrey's voice carried up the mountain. "Young Timothy Whitmore told us what Samuel Garrett brought to your doorstep. Artillery. Federal crimes. I may be corrupt, but I am not a traitor to Montana Territory." Rutherford called out, "You saved the Fairchild woman and her boy. We have not forgotten." The townspeople spread out surrounding Samuel's remaining men. Not threatening, just present. A show of force that said the people of this valley stood together. Samuel looked at his men, looked at the townspeople, looked up at Emma and her allies in the rocks. The calculation in his eyes was clear. He was outnumbered, outpositioned, out of options. "Your choice, Samuel," Emma called him down. "Surrender, face trial, or draw and die here." For a long moment, Samuel sat frozen on his horse. Then his hand moved, not to his gun, to the saddle horn. Gripping it, his shoulders sagged. "I surrender," he said, the words clearly costing him everything. Emma climbed down from the rocks, her Remington still in hand, but not pointed at Samuel. Nate and Doc followed. The townspeople parted to let them through. Emma walked up to Samuel's horse and looked up at him. "You killed the greatest man I ever knew," she said quietly. "You tried to kill me and everyone I care about. You deserve to die on this mountain." Samuel met her eyes, waiting for the bullet he knew he had earned. But Jeremiah Blackwood taught me that justice is not the same as revenge. So you will face trial. You will answer for every crime, every murder, every act of corruption, and you will spend whatever time you have left in a cell knowing that you lost to a 26-year-old woman on a mountain you thought was worthless. She turned to Sheriff Daltrey. Take him, and the evidence I have will bring down Governor Whitfield too. Daltrey nodded, genuine respect in his eyes. Yes, ma'am. But Samuel was not done. As Daltrey's men moved to bind him, he lunged from his horse, a hidden derringer appearing in his hand. You should have killed me, he screamed, the gun coming up toward Emma. And Emma Gray showed him one last time why legends were built on truth. Her draw was faster than thought, faster than breath. The Remington cleared leather and spoke once, the sound echoing off distant peaks. Samuel's gun fell unfired from his hand. He looked down at the spreading red stain on his chest, then up at Emma. With something like wonder in his dying eyes, how he whispered. Emma lowered her smoking revolver. Jeremiah taught me well, and you just made your choice. Samuel Garrett fell to his knees, then onto his face. The man who had ordered a legend killed, who had profited from corruption and murder, who had thought power and money could overcome skill and justice. He died in the dirt of a mountain that would never bear his name. The remaining hired guns looked at each other, looked at their dead employer, looked at Emma Gray, standing calm and ready over his corpse. And to a man, they holstered their weapons and raised their hands. We are done, one of them called. This was never our fight anyway. Emma nodded. Take your wounded and go. Spread the word that this mountain is protected, that Blackfoot Ridge remembers. They left quickly, taking what they could carry. Within an hour, only Emma's allies and the townspeople remained. It is over, Nate said quietly. We won. Emma holstered her Remington. No deputy. We survived. There is a difference. Abigail approached Benji, holding tight to her hand. What happens now? Now, Emma said, we rebuild. We make sure Samuel's death means something. We use his own documents to expose the corruption. We bring real law to Montana territory. And we make damn sure no one else has to face what we faced. And you, Doc asked, dabbing at his healing face wounds. What will you do? Emma looked out over the valley below. Over the land Jeremiah had loved and died protecting. Over the home she had built from ashes and grief. I am going to tend my sheep, she said simply. I am going to live the quiet life James wanted for me, but I am also going to remember. Remember that peace is worth fighting for. That justice sometimes requires a steady hand and a quick draw, and that the mountain never forgets those who protect it. She turned back to them. These people who had stood with her against impossible odds. You are all welcome on this mountain, anytime, for as long as you need. Because you are not just allies now, you are family, and family stands together. Trax cleared his throat. About that bounty in Wyoming, Emma smiled. Consider it the price of admission to the family, Mr. Calloway. They walked down the mountain together as the sun climbed higher. Behind them, the logging camp stood silent and scorched. Ahead, Pine Valley waited with its questions and its future. The mountain would remember this day, would remember the blood spilled and the stand made, would remember that when evil came calling, good people rose to meet it. And high on Blackfoot Ridge, near a simple grave marked only with a cairn of stones, the wind whispered through the pines. 6 months had passed since the mountain drank Samuel Garrett's blood. Emma Kate Thornwood stood in her garden, hands deep in rich earth, planting seeds for the summer harvest. The cabin had been rebuilt stronger than before with help from Pine Valley folks who remembered what she had done. The barn stood solid and weathered. 207 sheep grazed on the mountainside, 4 more than she had started with in November. Life continued. Life persisted. Copper, her roan mare, had foaled over the winter. A healthy colt that young Benji Fairchild had named Thunder, though the animal was as gentle as morning mist. Hoofbeats on the trail. Emma looked up, hand moving instinctively near the Remington she still wore even while gardening. Old habits died hard, probably would never die at all. But it was Nate Holloway now, sheriff of Pine Valley, after Daltrey had resigned in disgrace when the corruption trials began. The young man who had faced artillery and lived wore his badge with quiet pride. Miss Emma, just checking in. Any trouble? Emma smiled, her hands returning to the soil. The last trouble I had was a fox in the henhouse last week. I offered him mercy. He chose poorly. Nate laughed, the sound easy and genuine. I believe that. His expression grew serious. Federal marshal finished his investigation. Governor Whitfield goes to trial next month. Turns out Samuel's documents were enough to bring down half the territorial government. You did that. The law did that, Emma corrected. I just provided the evidence. They walked to Jeremiah's grave together as they did every month. The simple cairn now had a proper stone marker paid for by grateful townspeople. The inscription read, Jeremiah Iron Eyes Blackwood, 1814 to 1869. He taught peace to those who understood violence. And below it, a new addition. Emma had added herself, the mountain remembers. Nate left before sundown, his horse picking its way carefully down the trail. Emma stood watching the valley below as afternoon light painted everything gold. Pine Valley thrived. Abigail Fairchild had opened a bakery that filled the morning air with the scent of fresh bread. Trax Calloway had settled on nearby land, though he still disappeared for weeks at a time, tracking for the federal marshals who were cleaning up the territories. Doc Silas tended the sick with hands steadier than they had been in years. And Emma? She tended sheep, planted gardens, taught young women from the valley how to shoot, how to track, how to survive. Not to be killers, but to be ready if killers came. The Phantom of Blackfoot Ridge was legend now. Songs were sung in saloons about the widow who faced down 30 guns and artillery and won. Dime novels got the details wrong, but the spirit right. They made her taller, harder, colder than she was. Made Jeremiah into a giant. Made Samuel into a monster. Emma did not correct them. Legends served a purpose. They made bad men think twice before riding into certain valleys, before threatening certain widows. She touched her wedding ring, worn thin now, but still there, still catching the light. James, Jeremiah. The ghosts were quiet these days. At peace, she hoped. As was she. The mountain wind whispered through the pines, carrying the scent of coming summer. Wildflowers would bloom soon on the high meadows. The sheep would grow fat on new grass. The cycle would continue. Emma Thornwood went inside her cabin to make supper, a simple woman living a simple life. A life she had fought for, a life she had killed for, a life worth every drop of blood the mountain had demanded. Tomorrow she would ride into Pine Valley for supplies, would nod to familiar faces on Main Street, would maybe stop by Abigail's bakery for fresh bread and coffee, would listen to Nate tell stories about his week as sheriff, learning the job one day at a time. But tonight she stood at her window one last time, looking out over Blackfoot Ridge as darkness claimed the sky and stars emerged like scattered diamonds. The mountain remembers, she whispered to the night, and so do I. And somewhere in the darkness, if you listen close enough, you might have heard an answer. The wind through the pines, the creek over stones, the mountain itself patient and ancient, keeping watch over those who had earned its protection. Emma Gray Thornwood smiled and turned away from the window. Tomorrow would bring what it brought. But tonight she was home. She was safe. And she was exactly what Jeremiah and James had wanted her to be. Not a killer, not a victim, but a guardian. Someone who stood between the innocent and those who would harm them. Someone who knew that justice and mercy were not opposites but partners in the endless work of making the world a little less dark. The Phantom of Blackfoot Ridge had ridden into legend that November, but Emma Thornwood had simply come home. And sometimes that was victory enough.